The sea was calm that night, too calm, like the world was holding its breath before something broke. I stood barefoot on the balcony of my new beach house, the one I'd dreamed of for 40 years, listening to the tide whisper against the sand. The scent of salt and jasmine filled the air. For the first time since my husband passed, I felt peace. Then my phone rang. "Mom," my son said, his voice casual, too casual. "We're coming this weekend." I smiled. "That's wonderful, Andrew. I'll cook your favorite." "Oh, and Mom," he interrupted. "You'll have to move into the guest room. Melanie's parents are staying in your suite. Her brother and his kids too. They'll love the ocean view." I froze. "The guest room?" "Yeah," he said like it was nothing. "It's just temporary. You understand, right?" Before I could respond, Melanie's voice came through in the background, sharp, dismissive. "If she doesn't like it, there's a nursing home down the street." The line went quiet. Then Andrew cleared his throat and mumbled, "Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. You'll be more comfortable there anyway." And just like that, he hung up. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the sea crash against the rocks, louder now, angrier, as if it understood. The silence that followed was heavier than grief. That was the moment I knew love without respect isn't love at all, and I realized I could never let this happen again. My name is Joanne Miller, and I'm 63 years old. I built my life from nothing. A small cosmetics brand that started in my kitchen and grew into a company that changed my family's future. I worked through nights, missed anniversaries, and postponed dreams just to give my son a life I never had. When I finally sold my company, I promised myself one thing. I'd buy a home by the ocean, not a mansion, just something peaceful with white shutters and morning light that smelled like freedom. I called it the Haven. But that night, as I stood on that balcony with the waves roaring below me, I realized sometimes the people you raise can become the storm that destroys your peace. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? The East Coast? The quiet Midwest? Maybe somewhere far away, where the ocean sounds different, but heartbreak feels the same. Wherever you are, I want you to know this story isn't about money or houses. It's about something deeper. The moment a mother realizes her own child sees her as disposable. After the call, I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of Andrew on my nightstand. 10 years old, missing his front teeth, clutching the first sample box from my company like it was treasure. He used to say, "One day, Mom, I'll take care of you." And now he was ordering me into the guest room of my own home. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Melanie was just being protective. Maybe Andrew didn't mean it. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a truth I didn't want to face began to surface. The kind that comes slow, like dawn. I had built everything for them. My business, my wealth, even this house. But in doing so, I had taught them something dangerous. That I would always give. That I would always yield. When the call ended, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked outside again. The sky was turning violet, the sea restless under the moonlight. I could hear my husband's voice in my head, calm, steady. "Joe, the moment they stop respecting you, they stop deserving what you built." That night, I didn't cry. I watched the waves crash harder and whispered, "All right then. Let's see what happens when they arrive." The sea answered back, not with calm, but with thunder. And I swear, in that moment, it felt like the world was on my side. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, catching on the silver photo frames lined across my dresser. My reflection in the mirror looked calm. Too calm for someone whose son had just demoted her to a guest in her own house. But inside, something had shifted. It wasn't just hurt, it was recognition. Recognition of how quietly love can turn into entitlement. I made my coffee, black, no sugar, and carried it to the veranda. The waves were curling gently against the sand, foam glimmering like pearls in the morning light. It was supposed to be my view, my reward. Every brick, every tile, every plank of this house had been chosen with care. I'd spent years planning it. The open kitchen that faced the ocean, the reading nook by the window, the stone path where my husband used to say we'd watch sunsets when we were old. But I'd ended up watching them alone. My husband, Richard, had passed 3 years before I sold the company. He was the calm to my fire, the reason I never gave up when orders failed or debts piled up. When he died, I threw myself into work, as if success could fill the silence he left behind. And when I finally sold my company, it wasn't about wealth. It was about finishing what we started. The beach house was supposed to be a home for memories, not a hotel for people who barely knew me. I thought about the first time I showed it to Andrew. He'd said, "It's perfect, Mom. Just don't overdo it, okay? You're retired now. Enjoy the quiet." I'd laughed, thinking it was concern. Now I realized it was distance. The kind that comes when children start to see you as a background character in their own story. I walked through the rooms that morning, my hand brushing the furniture, the faint scent of cedar and sea salt trailing behind me. The walls still echoed with the music I used to play while unpacking. Billie Holiday, soft and slow. There was something sacred in those mornings, the solitude, the freedom of being no one's boss, no one's caretaker, no one's burden. And now they were coming to take even that. Melanie had never liked me. She'd once called my business cute, the same business that paid for their wedding, their first house, and her precious designer handbags. She had a way of smiling that wasn't a smile at all, just lips curved around judgment. And Andrew, he was different now, softer around her, quieter with me, like he'd been trained to keep peace by keeping distance. Still, I loved him. God help me, I loved him more than my own pride. I sat on the patio, looking at the sea, and for a moment memory pulled me backward. To the early years when I couldn't afford an office, when Andrew slept on the couch beside my workstation as I mixed lotions and perfumes until dawn. He'd wake up, rub his eyes, and say, "It smells like heaven, Mom." He was my reason, my everything. That little boy would never have spoken to me the way the man on the phone did last night. But then again, maybe I'd raised him too well to take what he wanted without ever wondering who paid the price. A gull cried overhead, pulling me back to the present. The waves hit harder now, impatient against the shore. I realized I'd been gripping my coffee cup so tight my knuckles had gone white. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I didn't give in, if I didn't move into that guest room, if I stopped making excuses for disrespect. I looked out over the horizon, the water stretching endlessly, glowing like molten glass. Somewhere beyond that blue was the life I had built, with grit, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. And yet, here I was, being told where I could and couldn't sleep in my own house. The irony was sharp enough to taste. That morning, I whispered to myself, "They think they're walking into a vacation. They have no idea they're walking into a lesson." The sea breeze carried my words away like a promise. They arrived 2 days later, not with warmth, not with hugs, but with luggage, loud laughter, and the kind of energy that doesn't belong in a peaceful home. I heard their car doors slam before I even reached the porch. Melanie's voice carried through the salty air, sharp, commanding, too comfortable already. "Put that one in the master suite," she told her brother. "Mom and Dad will take the big room with the ocean view." She said it like she was the owner, not the guest. Andrew followed behind them, eyes down, pretending to manage their bags. When he finally looked up and saw me, his smile was forced, polite, strained. "Hey, Mom." I hugged him, holding on longer than he expected. His body was stiff, like he didn't want to be there. Behind him, Melanie's parents, Harold and Evelyn, stood by the steps inspecting the house like real estate agents. Evelyn's lips twisted slightly. "Lovely place," she said, though the color palette could use more energy. "So beige," her husband grunted. "Where's the room with the better mattress? My back can't take soft ones." I smiled, tight and polite. "Good to see you too." The afternoon unfolded like a silent battle. Boxes and suitcases invaded every hallway, the smell of unfamiliar perfume mixed with my ocean breeze. Evelyn rearranged the living room for better flow. Melanie instructed Andrew to bring in extra towels from my linen closet. And when I finally tried to excuse myself to unpack a few groceries, Melanie smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, Joanne, don't worry about that. Just relax. You've done enough. We'll handle things from now on." The words, "handle things," stung like a slap. By sunset, I was standing outside my own bedroom door, locked. A note was taped there in Melanie's handwriting. "Guest room, down the hall." My name wasn't even on it. I stood there, holding my suitcase, the sea wind brushing through the hallway curtains. The house I'd designed to feel like peace now felt like exile. The guest room was small. A single window faced the neighbor's fence instead of the ocean. No view, no sound of waves, just the muffled laughter of people settling into my space. I sat on the bed, feeling the weight of something far heavier than betrayal. It was invisibility. Dinner that night was chaos. Harold complaining about weak wine, Evelyn criticizing the pasta for too little salt, Melanie making conversation about their future family plans. Andrew said nothing. Every time our eyes met, he looked away. When I tried to ask how long they'd be staying, Melanie smiled like I'd asked something ridiculous. "Oh, Mom, we'll see. You know how the beach just makes you want to stay forever." The others laughed. Even Andrew chuckled, softly, nervously. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. He wasn't my son anymore. He was her echo. I excused myself early, saying I was tired. I wasn't. I just couldn't sit there another minute pretending this was normal. That night, lying in the narrow bed, I listened to the muffled voices down the hall. Laughter, the sound of glasses clinking, a movie playing on the big TV I'd bought for family nights. The moonlight spilled across the floor, pale and cold. My chest ached, not from anger, but from the realization that my silence had become their permission. If you let people rewrite your story long enough, one day you wake up erased. I stared at the ceiling, hearing my husband's voice again in my head. "Joe, never let anyone make you small in your own home." I turned toward the window. No ocean, no stars, just the shadow of the fence. And under my breath, I whispered, "You think I'm quiet because I'm weak. You'll learn soon enough that I'm just waiting." The waves, somewhere beyond the walls, answered like applause. The next week felt like living inside someone else's life. My quiet mornings vanished, replaced by Harold's booming voice demanding eggs, done properly, and Evelyn's perfume thick enough to choke the ocean breeze. Melanie turned the living room into her workspace, scattering her makeup kits and phone chargers across the marble counter where I once drank tea in silence. And Andrew, my Andrew, drifted further into the background, nodding obediently, staying out of arguments, telling me I was too sensitive when I tried to speak up. "Mom," he'd say, "Mel's just trying to make things comfortable for everyone. You could relax a little." Relax. That word had never sounded so cruel. One morning, I came downstairs to find Evelyn sitting in my reading chair, Richard's chair, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. "Do you mind if we call the realtor today? Just curious what this place would go for. My cousin's a broker in Miami." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. "Excuse me?" She smiled faintly. "Oh, don't be so serious, dear. I just mean, if Andrew and Melanie ever decide to move closer to the city, this house would fetch a fortune. Wouldn't that be smart?" Before I could respond, Melanie swept in, draped in a silk robe. "Mom's just joking," she said, kissing Evelyn's cheek. Then, looking straight at me, she added, "But it's true. This property could be more useful if it wasn't just sitting here half the time." "Useful," I repeated. The word burned. Andrew appeared behind them, yawning, oblivious. "What's going on?" "Nothing, honey," Melanie said smoothly. "Just talking about the future." I stood there holding the teapot, watching steam rise like smoke from a fire I hadn't noticed spreading. Later that evening, I stepped outside to the patio for air. The horizon was bleeding orange into indigo. I needed quiet, but even that wasn't mine anymore. Through the open window, I could hear them laughing, Melanie's shrill giggle mixing with the sound of clinking glasses. Then, a different sound, a whisper. I edged closer to the open window, Andrew's voice. She'll sign it if we tell her it's for taxes. You know how Mom gets, she hates legal talk. Melanie replied, low and smug. Perfect. We'll get the deed transferred before she realizes. My dad can help with the paperwork. Once it's in our name, we can refinance and use part of it for the new condo. The glass in my hand almost slipped. Andrew's voice again, softer, uncertain. She might. What if she asks questions? She won't, Melanie said sharply. She'll be grateful we're handling things. That's what she always does. Silence. Then Andrew's reluctant sigh. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, but like old porcelain under pressure. I stepped back, pressing a hand to my chest. The cool air hit my face like truth. My son wasn't just weak, he was willing. I spent that night pacing my room, every creak of the floorboards echoing through me. They were planning to take my home, the last piece of the life I'd built, and for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt awake. They thought I was fragile. They thought I'd sign anything just to keep the peace. But peace built on obedience isn't peace. It's surrender. I went to my desk and opened the drawer where Richard's old fountain pen still rested. The one he used when we signed the final papers for the company. The one he'd said was, only for big decisions. I ran my thumb across its silver edge and whispered, all right, love, let's make one more big decision. The sound of the waves filled the room, steady and relentless. By the time morning came, I knew exactly what I was going to do. They wanted my house. I would let them walk right into it and watch what happened when they realized it no longer belonged to them. When the sun rose the next morning, the sea looked different, brighter, sharper, as if it knew something was about to change. I brewed my coffee in silence, listening to the waves slap against the rocks. Each one sounded like punctuation, final, deliberate. The plan had begun forming overnight, piece by piece, precise and steady. I wasn't going to fight them with shouting or tears. No, that's what they expected. I would do what they'd never imagine I could. Stay calm, smile, and outthink them. At breakfast, I found them lounging around the kitchen island. Evelyn was scrolling through real estate listings on her tablet. Harold had his shoes on the couch. Melanie was painting her nails on my marble countertop. I took a seat and said lightly, I've been thinking about what you said last night. Melanie looked up, wary but curious. About what? About the future, I said, stirring my tea. You're right. I need to get my affairs in order. The house, the will, all of it. So it's clear and simple for everyone. For the first time since they'd arrived, Melanie smiled, that dangerous kind of smile people wear when they think they've already won. Oh, Joanne, that's very wise. We'll help you with everything. You know how confusing those documents can be. Andrew added quickly, Yeah, Mom, we just want to make sure everything's handled properly. I nodded, pretending to swallow the bait. Of course, sweetheart. I'd feel better knowing it's all secure. Inside, my heartbeat was steady, my voice calm. They didn't know I'd already spent the early hours on the phone with my lawyer, Miles, the same man who had helped me sell my company years ago. I told him everything. He didn't sound surprised. Joanne, he said, we can protect your assets permanently. We'll transfer the house into a trust, in your late husband's name. That way, no one can touch it without your consent. I'll prepare the paperwork today. By the time Melanie and her parents thought I was agreeing to a transfer, the real transfer had already happened. Quietly, legally, and irrevocably. 2 days later, I decided to throw a dinner. A little celebration, I said, for family. Melanie clapped her hands. Perfect, we'll do it Saturday. Oh, Mom, that's so sweet of you. The irony almost made me laugh. I spent the morning decorating. Candles, white roses, soft jazz humming from the old speaker. The same music Richard loved. Every detail was intentional. A calm before a storm they didn't know was forming. As the sun began to set, the house glowed gold and pink. The air smelled of rosemary and sea salt. I set the table for 6. Wine glasses gleaming, silverware perfectly aligned. Melanie's father carved the roast like it was his own kitchen. Evelyn complained the wine was too dry. Andrew poured everyone a drink, avoiding my eyes. I lifted my glass. To family, I said softly. They all raised theirs, smiles everywhere, false and satisfied. To family, Melanie echoed, tapping her glass to mine. For a moment, the clinking sounded like the closing of a lock. Dinner went smoothly. Laughter, meaningless stories, plans about next summer at the house. They had no idea I'd already sealed their future. When Melanie leaned back and said, "You're doing the right thing, Joanne. We'll take care of everything now." I simply smiled. "I know you will," I said. "I've made sure of it." She didn't catch the meaning. Andrew did. A flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, gone as quickly as it came. I let the conversation drift into harmless chatter, but inside, my resolve was solid as concrete. They wanted ownership. They'd get revelation instead. That night, as they cleared the dishes and laughed in the kitchen, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The wind was rising, carrying the scent of a coming storm. The ocean glimmered in the darkness, fierce, unstoppable. It reminded me of myself. Tomorrow night, I thought, they'll finally understand who they've been playing with. And for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The storm rolled in just as I'd hoped. The sky that evening turned the color of bruised steel, clouds swirling over the horizon like warning signs. The wind carried the salt-heavy scent of rain, and somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured, low and deliberate, like a heartbeat. Inside, the house glowed with candlelight. I'd chosen the same table setting from the previous night, the one they thought was a family dinner. But tonight, it wasn't celebration. It was reckoning. They gathered around 6 o'clock, Melanie in her white linen dress, too polished for sincerity, Evelyn trailing perfume and entitlement, Harold already asking where the whiskey was, and Andrew, my son, wearing the same nervous half-smile he always used when he didn't know which side to stand on. "Why are we doing another dinner?" Evelyn asked, taking her seat. I smiled. "Because there's something important I'd like to share, a little announcement." They all perked up at that. I could see Melanie trying to contain her excitement, her eyes darting toward Andrew. They thought it was time, that I was about to sign everything over. Good. Let them believe it. The wind howled outside as I poured the wine. Lightning flashed through the windows, throwing fleeting shadows across their faces, greedy, expectant, confident. I raised my glass. To new beginnings. They echoed me, almost in unison. To new beginnings. I let the moment linger, then set my glass down carefully. "I met with my lawyer last week," I began. Melanie's lips curled into a victorious smile. "Oh, wonderful. That's so responsible, Joanne. I told Andrew you'd—" "And I recorded our conversation," I said softly, cutting her off. Her voice stilled mid-sentence. "What?" Thunder cracked outside, echoing through the walls. "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Every conversation we had in this house, every plan you made about transferring ownership for tax reasons, every word you said about refinancing this home and splitting the profit." The color drained from her face. Andrew's fork slipped from his hand and hit the plate with a sharp clang. Evelyn shifted in her chair, her perfume suddenly nauseating. "I also spoke with my lawyer about the trust," I continued. "This house now belongs to the Richard and Joanne Miller Foundation. It's a private trust. It cannot be sold, transferred, or claimed, not by anyone but me, not even my son." Lightning flared again, and in that moment I saw all of them, frozen, pale, speechless. Melanie's mother was the first to recover. You tricked us," she sputtered. "No," I said calmly. "I protected myself. There's a difference." Melanie slammed her napkin onto the table. "You can't just... This isn't fair. We thought..." "That's your mistake," I said. "You thought. You never asked. You never respected. You just assumed the woman who built this life was too old to defend it." Andrew's voice finally broke through the tension. "Mom, please," he said, his tone cracking between shame and disbelief. "You didn't have to do all this." I turned to him slowly. "Didn't I? You were going to let them take everything your father and I built. You were willing to make me a guest in my own home. And you want to talk about what I didn't have to do?" His eyes dropped to the table. Rain hammered against the windows like applause from heaven itself. I stood then, collecting the empty plates one by one, each motion deliberate, controlled. "When the storm clears," I said, quietly, "you'll all be gone by morning. I've already spoken to the police about removing unauthorized residents from private property, so please, don't test me." Melanie rose halfway from her seat, trembling with fury. "You're unbelievable." "No," I replied, setting the last plate down. "I'm unbreakable." For a long moment, no one spoke. The thunder rolled again, distant now, fading toward the sea. Finally, I looked at Andrew one last time. "You once told me you'd take care of me when I was old, but somewhere along the way, you forgot who took care of you." I turned toward the window, the reflection of lightning flickering in the glass. "Now, it's my turn to take care of myself." The storm broke just after midnight. By morning, the house was quiet. No laughter, no perfume, no whispers. Only the sound of the ocean steady and free again. They were gone. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. The morning after they left, the silence felt different. It wasn't the empty kind. It was clean, honest, full of breath again. I opened the balcony doors, and the ocean greeted me like an old friend. The waves were gentle now, curling softly against the sand, as if the sea itself had been holding its breath until I reclaimed my home. I walked barefoot across the living room. Their scent was gone. No more perfume, no traces of cheap cologne or tension, just salt, wood, and sunlight, the way it was meant to be. For the first time since Richard's passing, I felt him close. Not in grief, but in gratitude. His picture on the mantel seemed to smile in the morning light. I whispered, "You were right, love. The moment they stop respecting you, they stop deserving what you built." I made myself a slow breakfast, eggs, coffee, and a slice of toast, and sat by the window facing the horizon. The air outside was fresh after the storm. The sea had washed away the footprints from the night before. The deck glistened like new. I thought about everything that had happened. The phone call, the invasion, the betrayal, the storm. And through it all, one truth had stayed clear. People don't steal from you because they need what you have. They steal because they believe you'll let them. And for years, I had. I had been so busy being generous, so desperate to avoid conflict, that I'd mistaken silence for love. But silence isn't love. It's erasure. Later that week, I called Miles, my lawyer. He confirmed everything was finalized. The trust was secure, the documents registered, and a clause added to ensure the house would pass only to charity when I was gone. He said, "Joanne, you've done something most people never find the courage to do. You took your life back." That night, I opened a bottle of the good wine, the one Richard and I had saved for someday. I poured a glass, stepped outside to the balcony, and let the breeze lift my hair. The sky was streaked in shades of amber and rose. The world was calm again, but I wasn't the same woman who'd answered that phone call a few weeks ago. That woman had been hurt, lonely, willing to shrink for the sake of love. This one? She understood that peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you fight for quietly, with clarity and grace. I didn't hear from Andrew for weeks. When he finally called, his voice was small, unfamiliar. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me." I could hear Melanie in the background whispering, "Tell her we didn't mean it." I took a deep breath. "I know you're sorry," I said softly, "but apologies don't rebuild what respect destroys." He didn't argue. He just said, "I miss you." I smiled, a little sadly. "Then learn from me, Andrew. One day when you have children, remember this. Love without gratitude turns into greed." We said goodbye quietly. I didn't hang up angry. I hung up free. The weeks turned into months. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My canvases filled with color, oceans, skies, the illusion of calm that hides strength underneath. I began volunteering at a local women's business network, mentoring widows and retired mothers who wanted to start over, just like I had. And each time I told them my story, I saw a spark in their eyes, the same one that had carried me through that stormy night. Because sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it sits at a kitchen table, signing papers with steady hands, reclaiming what's yours. Now, every morning, I step out onto my balcony with my coffee and whisper to the sea, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." The waves answer back, soft but sure, like applause from something greater than myself. I built a company. I built a family. And when both tried to define my worth, I built myself again. That betrayal didn't break me. It lit a fire in me I never thought I had.